Hello, it's Grace Gerke, and I'm going to be talking to you about my mini exchange to France. During my junior year of high school, I got the opportunity to spend 3 weeks in France. During the first 2 weeks, I was staying in Epinal, which you can see up in the northeast corner of France. While I was there, I stayed with a girl who was my age and her family, and then after spending 2 weeks there, I went to Paris for 1 week with a group of other American exchange students. While I got to spend 3 weeks in France, Clara, the girl I stayed with, also got to spend 3 weeks in America the summer after that. It was a cool experience because while I was able to see a different culture, I was also able to see somebody else experience my culture. It was interesting to see the things that she found interesting, like cheese curds and the price of gas, which are exponentially higher in France than they are in America. Epinal is a medium-sized town in the east of France. It's a little bigger than De Pere, but not considered a large city. I lived in a neighborhood similar to those in the United States, only the houses were smaller in comparison. Everything was smaller, actually. The yards, bathrooms, cars, serving sizes, but everything was bright and colorful. Aesthetics are highly valued in France. As you can see in the pictures, on the right, that's a view of the street from the house I was staying at, and on the left, that's a city view. The culture and mindset of people living in Epinal were some of my favorite things about the city. While there, everyone seemed to be on tranquilizers. It was very peaceful, and people seemed to slow down and enjoy life way more than people in America do. Every night, me and Claire's family would all sit outside on the patio or in the living room with the big windows open, and we would read a book, work on a project, and just exist quietly. We were never in a rush to get anywhere, and people just seemed to move through life with fewer worries. People are definitely more high strung and anxious in America. French people seem to have a good perspective on the important things in life, and I wish I could have brought that feeling back with me to the United States. The picture on the left is an accurate depiction of what the culture was like. This is a view of the porch from the balcony on the second floor of the house I stayed at. You can see my host mother soaking in the hot tub, while my host father sits on the bench and reads a book after a long day at work. It was such a relaxing environment to be a part of. Meal times in France were some of my favorite times. As you can see, the dinner table was outside. The weather in France is pretty similar to the weather in Wisconsin, at least in Epinal. So, since it was summer, it was really nice out. Even when it rained, we could still eat on the patio because you can see the cover. Every meal was a little different, but all of it was delicious. For breakfast, it was pretty casual, but we would always eat something small and something sweet, and usually pretty late in the morning. For lunch, both parents would come home from work and we would cook for them. I'm not sure if this was a normal tradition in France or if it was just the household that I was staying at, but at least for us, the kids would always cook for the parents. We would all spend a lot of time eating together and updating each other on our days. Then we would all clean up together and the parents would go back to work for a few hours before returning for dinner. Dinners were extra special. It took a long time to prepare for, and they always took a long time to eat. We would have multiple courses and we'd all spend many hours getting through them, sitting on the patio, talking, cleaning up, eating cheese. While in Epinal, I also got the opportunity to experience a formal dinner. We walked to my host family's friend's house, nobody drives if they can help it in France, and spent hours enjoying a 5 course meal. Dinner is eaten much later in France, so we didn't start the meal until almost 8 o'clock. We made our way through courses of eggplant, lamb, dessert, and then ended with a cheese tray. All dinners in France end with a cheese tray being passed around. French people encourage conversations about religion and politics at the dinner table, usually taboo topics in America, but we sat around eating, drinking wine, and chatting until after midnight. French food is similar to food in America, it's just overall healthier and fancier. They use less salt and cook with less oil. On the left, you can see a quiche, which is something that most Americans are familiar with. It's essentially egg casserole. In France, quiche is eaten for dinner, though, instead of for breakfast, like in the United States. In the middle picture, you can see the French version of homemade pizza. It's the same idea as American pizza, only they make theirs on baguettes. And in the last picture, you can see a typical side dish that would go with a French meal: chopped tomatoes mixed with salt and basil. We ate lots of sweet foods, and French pastries truly live up to the hype. It's an art form in France. We had desserts after both lunch and dinner. In the afternoons, at around 4 o'clock, we would have what they call le goûter, or a snack between lunch and dinner. It usually involved mojitos and delicious French pastries. Here you can see more examples of French pastries. On the right, there's a plate of les macarons. These small cookie-like pastries are very iconic in France. In the middle, there's a crepe, which is another popular sweet in France. Crepes can also be made savory, though. And finally, on the left is an example of the inside of a French bakery. My first night in Epinal, we had a picnic. We went to the market and picked out cheese and sausages. We then took the food and a bunch of beer to a lakeside and ate on a big blanket on the ground. Picnics are very popular in France, and there were lots of other people having their own picnics around us at the lake. In the picture on the left, you can see a large burnt cake. It's supposed to be that way because it's a very sweet cake, so the bitterness of the burnt parts helps to balance out the flavors. Here are some pictures of baguettes and a French bakery. Yes, I'm going to continue talking about food because it's very important to their culture. I was able to go to a French bakery and learn the art of making baguettes. It's a very sacred part of their culture. Baguettes are so important to the people of France that the prices were fixed. Dating back to the French Revolution, the price of baguettes were controlled by the government up until the 1980s. Now the government doesn't impose price controls on bread, but prices are still very closely monitored by customer associations. The price of a baguette today ranges from about €1 to €1.50. I visited Nancy during my stay in Epinal, a bigger city in the east of France that was about an hour away from Epinal. You can see a street view of Nancy in the picture on the left. It's a college town with very old buildings. The picture of the cathedral on the right was also taken in Nancy. France had a lot of nobility during pre-revolution times, and all of them had castles and huge estates. These structures still exist all over France. In the middle picture, you can see one of the castles that I got to visit. After 2 amazing weeks in Epinal, I took the TGV to Paris with a group of other American students. The TGV is a super high-speed train that carries passengers all over the country. It reaches speeds over 200 miles per hour. On the left, I included a picture of a snail that I found on the sidewalk. They were all over Epinal, which I thought was funny. After arriving in Paris, I immediately knew that I preferred the quiet town of Epinal. Paris was crazy, chaotic, loud, smelly, dirty, and full of rude tourists. But it was also beautiful. Once I got over the noise and stench, I realized how amazing the city was. There were gardens, there was music, and of course, the Eiffel Tower. Art is a huge part of the culture in Paris. Everywhere I looked, there was art. It was in the architecture, in museums, and even on the streets. On the left, you can see the Paris Opera House. The art on the ceiling and on the light fixtures was mesmerizing. In the middle is an example of a Van Gogh painting, and on the right is an example of a modern-day French artist trying to sell her work in the streets. The Louvre is the most famous art museum in the world, and the building itself is a piece of art, as shown in the bottom picture. There are miles and miles of corridor to explore, all full of priceless art. The Mona Lisa, one of the most well-known paintings in the world, is shown on the top left, and on the top right you can see the statue known as Winged Victory. Besides art, the museum included many options for shopping, another large part of the Parisian culture. Hello! For my show and tell, I'm going to be talking about Bastille Day in France. So this is my object. It's a paper lantern. What you do is you light a candle, you put it on the inside, and there's actually a stick that goes with this, and then everybody walks around with their lanterns held out in front of them, and it's usually celebrated at night, so everybody's lanterns are glowing, and it's really neat to see. Bastille Day is the equivalent of 4th of July in America, only it's celebrating French independence. It celebrates the storming of the Bastille that happened July 14th, 1789, and it was a large turning point in the French Revolution. More formally, Bastille Day is known as La Fête Nationale. So, in France, people celebrate similarly to the way we celebrate in the United States when we celebrate 4th of July. Everybody gets the day off of work, they eat large meals, there's music, dances, they throw large parties, and there's fireworks. The fireworks in France, though, they involve music, and they play music behind the fireworks, which is really cool, and I think we should incorporate that into our 4th of July fireworks. In Paris, there's a large military parade. What they do is they start and line up by the Arc de Triomphe, and then they all march down the Champs-Élysées and see all the people. Bastille Day is an amazing cultural experience, and if you can ever visit France during Bastille Day, I would definitely recommend it. It's just as cool as the 4th of July, only you can experience another culture celebrating in their own way. So I definitely recommend it. Thank you for watching my presentation on my mini exchange to France, and I hope you learned something about the culture.